Hi world, hi YouTube. This is Sabrina in China. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, thank you so much for joining. Today I'm in my school's library because I'm doing a book review today. And what better place to do a book review than in a library? So here we are in this library and I'm going to share with you my thoughts on this book that I've been reading, Has China Won? By Kishore Mahbubani. Yes, this book was such a great read, guys. I learned so much reading this book. I learned so much more about the relationship between China and the US, why the relationship broke down, how the relationship is going. And throughout the chapters, he asks very important questions. One of the questions he asked is China an expansionist? And he answered that questions with a lot of examples, a lot of details, a lot of analysis to show that China is absolutely not an expansionist. He asked another question: can America make U-turns as it relates to the relationship with China? Should China become a democracy? And throughout this book, he answered these questions. Guys, if you haven't read this book and you want to understand more about the relationship between China and the US, I think this is such a great read for you. You will learn so much, like myself, things that I didn't know about, I discovered. In the first chapter, it started off by talking about China's biggest strategic mistake as it relates to the relationship with the US. And he purports that China's biggest mistake was alienating the American business class. In this chapter, he started off by sharing some success stories or successful business relationship between China and the American business class. He started off by talking about Boeing, aircraft manufacturing company Boeing, and he mentioned that in 1993, Boeing was earning 5.7% of profits from China. And at the end of 2017, they were earning 21% of profits from China. We went on to talk about automotive companies like GM and Ford, how much profits they earn from doing business in China, and that these companies, they were not particularly successful in the US, but China, because of their policies to not only work with automotive companies from Japan and Europe, they opened their markets to American automotive companies, and so they were able to enter the Chinese market and earn huge and earn a lot from the Chinese market. So those are some of the successful business relationship that he discussed in the book. And he went on to talk about how these companies, they were the strongest voices in supporting and defending China's relationship with the US. He mentioned how in the 90s, Boeing was one of the loudest voices defending China's most favored nation status when Bill Clinton tried to challenge that status for China. And so these voices were loud and strong in supporting China. But he asked the question, why did these voices go silent when Donald Trump launched trade wars against China? He asked that question. And he purported that this happened because China didn't listen to the complaints of the business community, of the American business community when they complained. He mentioned that complaints to the American chambers of commerce in Shanghai and Beijing went unheard many times, and that the American business class felt bullied while doing business in China. And he mentioned about the fact that the policies in China, they sometimes require technological transfers, things like intellectual property theft, imposing non-tariff barriers. These were some of the policies and actions by China that caused American business class to feel bullied and alienated and unappreciated in China. So when Donald Trump launched trade wars against China, they went silent. They were no longer defending China. And because China lost the support of the US business class, that led to a bipartisan support of trade wars against China. There were no voices defending China against Trump. Business class rallied behind Trump. Both political sides rallied and supported Trump on their decision to basically go to a trade war with China. That is the reason why he said they went silent, and that is China's biggest mistake, he purported to us. So what do you think? Do you think that This is the biggest mistake China made as it relates to the American community. Did China make another mistake that led to the breakdown of the China-US relationship? And then he went on to talk about America's biggest strategic mistake. And he said that, and I agree with this one. He said America's biggest mistake, what I understood is that was to underestimate China and the weaponization of the American dollar. And why did America and is America still underestimating China? He answered this question in my mind. He said, America believes it will always be in position of power, right? So they feel like they can do whatever they want, say what they want. China can never take their place. This is how America is feeling. They assume that they will always be in a position of power, and so they can't afford to underestimate China. And because America also believe they will always be in a position of power, they are able to weaponize the dollar, because no one can do trade right now without using the American dollar, right? And the weaponization of the dollar is giving incentive to other countries to find ways and means to bypass the dollar. And that, he purports, is America's biggest strategic mistake: weaponizing the dollar and underestimating China. Now, we hear talks of dollar bypass. We hear talks of making the Chinese currency something that people trade in. So is America making a mistake by weaponizing the dollar? In my opinion, absolutely. He gave a very vivid example of how a British bank was fined $340 million for using the US dollar to trade with Iran. And if anyone knows anything about America, we know that America heavily sanctioned Iran and they're not trading with Iran. So yes, and this, he says, is America's biggest mistake, and underestimating China's ability to step up in those positions where America is lacking. Now China is seeing what is happening. China is playing a long-term game and seeing what is happening. They're taking steps, small steps, to get to the place where countries can use the Chinese currency as a means of trading. So what do you guys think? Do you think there will be a dollar bypass? Do you think countries will be doing trades without using the American dollar in the future? Do you think America will lose their position as the world's reserve currency? I mean, what do you guys think about that? Let me know. In the next chapter, he asks a very important question: is China expansionist? And in this chapter, he started off by sharing some of China's territorial expansions. And he mentioned that most of China's territorial expansions were done when they were ruled by foreign dynasties. He went on to compare China's behavior to that of the US. China values men who are scholars. China values peace. And he compared that to the US, who values men in uniforms, men who are able to show might and power, right? He said that when China is faced with a challenge in the international arena, China tends to use diplomacy and peace to resolve those conflicts. The US, on the other hand, would prefer to use military prowess to demonstrate their military might in resolving those conflicts. And he gave a lot of examples of times when US resorted to using military powers to resolve conflicts all over the world, right? There are several examples in that. He mentioned a very good principle of the Chinese people, and it's the principle of non-interference, right? He talked about the fact that Chinese believe that only Chinese people can be Chinese in values, in principles, in systems. So China do not try to put their way of living on other countries and other states. Unlike the US, they believe they have a right. It's their virtue, it's their place in the world, it's their duty to civilize, to make the rest of the world civilized, to spread democracy, right? The US believes in that they must show the rest of the world how to be civilized, how to live right. And so this principle, it is what tends to give America this feeling that they need to show their way of living to other countries. You know, America has this universalism principle. We must show them the American way. And that is one of the things he believed is the main cause of America getting involved in so many wars overseas. A lot of people may think, wow, this writer is saying China is not an expansionist, but they're trying to conquer Taiwan. And this is where I discovered something that I did not know. I absolutely did not know this. In this book, he explicitly mentioned that there was an agreement between the US and China. And I will read directly from the book. The US side declared, the United States acknowledged that all Chinese on either side of the Taiwan Strait maintains there is but one China and that Taiwan is part of China. The United States government does not challenge that position. And this agreement they came to this agreement in 1972. I absolutely did not know about this agreement. I genuinely don't know. I don't purport to know everything. Now, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, the US is saying China is becoming aggressive and China is expansionist, but there is this agreement that they acknowledge this one China policy, but then now they're deciding to walk away from this agreement, not honoring this agreement, and now calling China an expansionist country. So a lot of you will say that China is an expansionist. They're trying to get Taiwan, but the US, who is now the loudest voice in saying China is aggressive, China is trying to conquer Taiwan, China is this, there was this agreement that they acknowledged one China. So now it's, guys, this was like a bombshell for me. Not saying I agree or disagree with anything here, but wow, listen, guys, this is not the whole of this book. There are other chapters that I've not talked about, but if you want to learn so much more on this relationship between China and the US, get your hands on this book. And this is not sponsored. It's absolutely not sponsored. I just read this book. My colleague introduced this book to me. I read it. I love it. It's eye-opening. I learn a lot, and I just decided to read it. And I wanted to share with you guys a few things that I've learned from this book and my understanding of some stuff. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. This has been Sabrina in China. Until next time, goodbye.